to the Xeriscape Learning Center and Design Garden. I'm Joanne Salgi. I'm a Nueces County Master Gardener and part of the Xeriscape Steering Committee here in Corpus Christi. In 1993, a group of volunteers, master gardeners, city employees, and concerned citizens started thinking about what can we do to educate the public on how you can still have a beautiful landscape and use less water. The garden was designed by local landscape architect Doug Wade, and the master gardeners have been integral parts in maintaining it over these years. In South Texas, we know that 1 out of every 4 years, statistically, we're going to be in a drought situation. Considering that, planting things that are going to be tough and durable and can handle drought only makes sense. So all of the plants that you'll find in the Xeriscape garden are either native or plants that are very adaptive to our vicinity, to our humidity, our wind, our heat, and our lack of rain. There's almost 100 different varieties of plants here, and so one of the reasons that they put this garden in place so many years ago was that they wanted people to think of a diverse landscape, different colors, different textures, different types of plants. When most people think of Xeriscape, they tend to think of cactus, succulents, rocks, and they think it's a desert. And our garden is anything but a desert. We've just come through an extremely hot summer, and everything still looks green with a very minimal amount of water and irrigation. During the summer months, we try to irrigate about 1 inch a week, and during the winter months, we cut that back to about 1/2 inch. We do monitor all of the rainfall that we have here, and we keep very meticulous records of how much rain we get here. The plants that are in the garden are plants that have been chosen specifically for you, the home gardener. We don't want you to go out and spend an enormous amount of money on landscaping your property and being disappointed because very quickly it'll pass away and it'll be gone. So we have 7 principles, and these principles aren't anything exotic. They're nothing that a regular gardener wouldn't consider, for any type of garden. So if you use these principles, you can eliminate approximately 60% of the amount of water that otherwise you would be putting on your landscape. Each year, whenever water is treated in the state of Texas, about 1/3 of all of those gallons of water that are treated to make drinking water is going onto someone's lawn. So some of the things that we do here are to try to make sure that we always have a nice looking landscape, a pleasant environment, and we're using less water. First, you need to take a really good inventory of the space that you're going to be working in. If this isn't your home, think about who uses that space. Do you have children? Do you have pets? Do you have a budding soccer star or a budding football star? Who's going to be using it? And so how much space are you going to need? Are you going to want a pool at some point? Look at all of your hard surfaces. Look at your driveway, your sidewalks, utility poles, cable boxes. Any of those things are going to have effect and bearing on where you plant and how you plant. Also consider where your water sources are. You may want to consider consulting with a professional designer. We have really great resources here as far as our local folks and their landscape nurseries, and they're always able to help you with any phase of your project. Before you start planting, you need to think about your soil. We tend to forget about our soil, but that is a critical part of any good garden. If you live on the south side of town, you may have heavy clay. If you live out on the island or in Flower Bluff, you may have a lot of sand. So you're going to need to amend that with things like cotton burr compost, possibly expanded shale, whatever it's going to take to get your garden going and growing. You can also do a soil test. Most of the soils here are going to need some amending. So having a soil test will tell you exactly what you've got and what you need to add to make it look better. So now you need to make sure you have practical turf areas. So it's a good practice if you want to be very water efficient to limit your turf area to about 20 to 25% of your lawn. So use it as an accent feature. You know, don't have long, expansive patches of grass. Grass is your thirstiest plant, and it's going to use a whole lot more water than anything else you're going to plant in your garden. There's a lot of different varieties here in our area. A lot of people will tend to use carpet grass and the St. Augustine varieties, but also there's some newer varieties of Bermuda grass that are really hardy and tough and can take the worst drought conditions. So do your homework whenever you're considering what type of grass to put in. So they're not all created equal. Some are going to use more water than others. So now you've got your design, you've got great dirt, you've got a practical turf area. So now you're going to think more about your plants. We really encourage you to use plants that are native. They're going to be hardier than anything else you can use, but also plants that are going to adapt to our seasonal changes, which usually means going from hot to hotter. So consider going to your local nurseries. They're going to have plants that are going to be suited for our environment. Some of the big box stores are going to be buying for a wide area, and so they may not be as well suited for this area as what you're going to find in your local nurseries. Ask questions while you're there. Ask them how much water it needs, and is this good for sun or is this good for shade? So when you're thinking about those plants, again, go back to what you saw whenever you first created your design. So whenever you're at the nursery, look at things that have different colors, different textures, different shapes and sizes. That will add interest to it. Consider having higher and lower levels. Again, that will add more interest. Think about, even though we don't have very defined seasons, think about what something will look like in the winter. What will it look like in the spring? What will it look like in the summer? When is it going to be blooming? So think of those things in relationship to the other plants that you're putting there. And then I think you're going to have a garden that you're going to enjoy for many, many years. Whenever you're making your plant selection, leave a little space for some edibles. It's so much fun to be able to go out and harvest your own food and your own vegetables. So, or maybe there's a nice area that's in full sun that you want to put in a vegetable garden. Raised bed gardens are they're very easy to maintain, and here in South Texas, you can have a vegetable garden almost year round. And your kids will enjoy it, you'll enjoy it, and it's also a healthy option. If you're planting more trees, you might want to consider planting citrus, or behind me we have a great big pecan tree. We also, here in the Xeriscape garden, we have some olive trees. And they're a beautiful shape and texture and color, and so they add a lot of interest to your garden and to the way it looks. The Xeriscape Steering Committee, along with the City of Corpus Christi Water Utilities, has produced for a number of years a wonderful plant guide. These are plants that we have tried and that are tried and true in our Xeriscape garden, and these are plants that we would recommend for you, the home gardener, for this area. So this is a great resource, and the information will be available to you online. So take a few minutes to look and see what you like and make sure that you add those to them. So there's a lot of different things that you can do whenever you're watering efficiently. One is follow the city ordinance. We're not allowed to use irrigation whenever it's after 10 a.m. in the morning or before 6 p.m. That is in violation of a city ordinance. You can hand water at that time or at any time, but you have to be in control of the amount of water. There are a lot of different things that you can do to make sure that you are watering efficiently. One of the methods is cycle soak. Cycle soak is whether you're using an irrigation system or whether you're just have sprinklers and hoses, if you can water your soil or your landscape about 10 minutes in a zone or an area, then stop it, take it to another area, start another 10 minutes approximately in the next area, and then later on come back and water that first area the second time. Most of the soil in Corpus Christi is either very sandy or a very heavy clay. And sandy soil does not hold water well, and clay is kind of impenetrable at times. So the first pass will sort of loosen up the soil a little bit and allow the second time that you irrigate for the water to soak in more efficiently. The deeper the water can go, the better for the health of the plant. So you don't want to just surface water, you want to make sure that you water infrequently and you water deeply. Some of the ways that you can always have water on hand would be to have a rain barrel system. Here in the garden, we do have rain barrels set up as demonstrations, but anybody can set them up. They're very easy. There's a lot of resources out there. And rainwater is very, very healthy. It is very recuperative. Your yard will always green up so much more after a good rainfall. And so adding that water that has not been treated, that didn't cost you anything other than to set up your rain barrels, is really going to save you money, and it's going to be available for whenever you want to water some of your plants. Another thing you need to consider about your plants is putting them in zones. If you have plants that are very, very thirsty, or if you have edibles like tomato plants or cucumbers or zucchinis or those, they're a softer texture. They don't have woody stems, and so they're going to need a little bit more water. So when you think about your property and how you're watering, put those things that are going to need more water closer to your hose bib or closer to your water source or closer to your rain barrel. That way you can readily water them. And then the things that don't require as much water, if you did have cactus or succulents or woody plants, trees, they're going to need less water. So they could be further away from your water source or your water barrel or your hose bib. So those are just a few of the tips that you might want to consider whenever you're thinking about the principle of how to water efficiently. So we're nearing the end of our story of how to have a successful garden and how to save water. So there's still a couple more things that you need to keep in mind. One is mulch. Mulch is going to hold moisture in, and it's also going to give good cover for plant roots and keep things in their place. You can use any types of mulch. You could use pine straw, you could use newspaper if you wanted to. You could use wood products, cedar, hardwoods, rocks maybe, depending on where you were. One of the things you might want to consider is where you're mulching. Is there going to be a lot of rainfall? And if water flows across that area, will the mulch float away or sink, or what's going to happen to it? So if you use the big pine mulch, lots of times you'll see it floating down the street into your neighbor's yard. So you choose, the color, the style, whether you want rock or whether you want a natural material. If you use a natural material, eventually it's going to decompose and it's going to put nutrients back in your soil. So that's a plus. Rocks, on the other hand, if you put a lot of rocks down, make sure that the plants that you put in that area are really tough and have woody stems, because the rocks will hold and generate heat. So those are some of the things that you might want to consider when you're choosing your mulch. So finally, we're at the end. Now, one of the things that you are going to have to keep in mind, you do have to water your plants, regardless of how water efficient your plants are. They're always going to need some water to get them started and to maintain them through their life cycle. Another thing you're going to need to do is make sure that you clear away any dead branches or debris around them. Keep the weeds to a minimum. Pull up those weeds. Those weeds are going to drink a lot of water, and you want your plant to get that water instead. So a good pruning schedule during the winter when things are dormant and before they start actively growing, and keeping any dead or diseased plants away from the rest of them. Keeping in mind that if you do have to use fertilizers or pesticides, that you look at organic options or mechanical options versus chemicals. Make sure that you keep the pests away from your plants, keep the debris away from your plants and any dead or dying branches. Keep it well maintained and pruned. You may like a more natural look, but don't let dead branches accumulate. If you do need to fertilize, or if you do need to use any kind of insecticide or pest management, consider things like ladybugs, or using a good blast of water. Lots of times we'll get bugs off of things. So there's a lot of organic and mechanical ways that you can keep the pests off your plants. Now I think that we've pretty much covered everything you're going to need to do to have a beautiful, successful lawn landscape, adding those edibles and having fruit trees and things like that that you and your family can enjoy. And I hope that you save water and remember to make every drop count.